Hi, my name is Brendan Radabaugh, and I will be your host for the Orlando Regional Workshop Series. Thank you to the Orlando Orange County government for helping us put the series together. I am joined with James Austin. James is a alumni to Team 1902, Exploding Bacon, and he's going to be helping us go over how to write for awards and more in depth of what to get ready for when you're getting ready to write for your Chairman's Award, your Woody Flowers Award, and your Dean's List Award. James, can you tell me more about your background?
Yeah, so I started in first in 2005 on a team that doesn't exist anymore, 1083 Emoticons. And once they folded, we started 1902, and I've been helping first ever since and been mentoring since 2009. So mentored Bacon for a while and then moved to Virginia and mentored a team called Kilroy and then Fahrenheit Robotics. And now I'm kind of mentoring remotely from New York.
And how long were you, or when you were a student on Bacon, what were your jobs?
I started as a mechanical student mostly, and as a driver for a while from 2007 and 2008. But once I became a mentor, we already had very good mechanical mentors, and I was still not quite expertise enough to sort of take over any of that role. So I moved into more of a communications mentoring position, which actually led me to the career I'm in now, which is a writer for a website called wirecutter.com, which does about product reviews and stuff like that. And that's basically because we needed somebody in Bacon who kept track of not only award submissions, but grant writing, sponsorship letters, marketing packets, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we definitely weren't willing to give you power tools because most of the time that meant something was going to break.
It was usually the right call to not give me power tools, yeah.
Yep, your other half of the brain wasn't there, you most days. So for awards, why would we need to prep on writing the awards?
So just like you need to sort of have an idea of what your robot's going to look like before you start the building process, you have to have an idea of what you are going to write about when you write for awards. Anytime you're writing an award or any sort of like persuasive argumentative essay, you need to have a point that you're trying to make. And in order to do that, you need to have evidence, data about what you've been doing, any sort of stats you collected, that sort of thing. And a lot of that, before you can ever like actually write anything, you kind of need to gather that all together, get it all in one place, organize your thoughts, and actually like start the prep process before you can actually start on the writing process, which is a whole nother set, which we're going to talk about today.
Okay. And you have a presentation ready. Would you like to put it up on screen?
I do. We'll go ahead and start into it as soon as I figure out how Zoom works, which is what we've all been doing for a year. So this is thoughts on writing for first and otherwise. Like Brendan said, we're using this basically to structure around the award submissions you're going to be doing in first as you go through, but also this advice sort of exists for not only award submissions, but college application essays, job applications, writing your boss to try to get a raise. Like this is all the same sort of ideas that you can carry on as you go through life. Like Brendan said, I'm a founding member of Exploding Bacon 1902. I've been a communications mentor since 2009 after I graduated. And I've been working in some sort of professional communications role since 2012. I've done social media marketing, I've done reporting, I've done product journalism, which I'm doing right now. And I've sort of been doing that ever since, which is where I get my expertise and why I'm talking to you about it. In the years that I've been writing, either professionally or otherwise, often in college and high school, I kind of like got this sort of process unintentionally. You basically want to figure out what question you want to answer and write to answer that question, figure out what actually you're trying to say. Then once you've got what you want to say, refine it, reorganize it, make sure your point is actually like progressing in the way you want it to make your point clear and valid, not only to you, but you kind of want to lead your reader to the conclusion without them realizing that's what you're doing. Once you got that, especially when you're doing award submissions or anything like that, you have to do a lot of cutting to get into the word or character counts, which, as those who work on Chairman's know, 10,000 characters is a lot shorter than you think it is, and you run up against it very quickly. And after years of this very clunky sort of process that you see there, I've boiled it down to pretty much 3 steps. You say the thing better, when you say the better thing shorter. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So say the thing. When you're trying to figure out what you want to say and what point you're trying to make, what you really got to focus on is what are you trying to answer, and how should you individually answer it. The most important thing you can bring to any sort of writing is what you or your team or your group originally sort of has. There are no other first teams like your first team. That's just a fact. So what makes your answer that you bring to this will be uniquely yours, and you have to bring that power sort of out. Also keep in mind who you're trying to convince, and that's when a lot of mapping and planning can take place. This is the description on the first website of what the Chairman's Award is. When I was working with Bacon, and when I've worked on any sort of Chairman's Award submission that I've worked on, this is what sort of the question we needed to answer in the essay, and in sort of other ways, the presentation and also the video itself. The Chairman's Award it honors the team that best represents the model for other teams to emulate and best embodies the mission of FIRST. Best is relative, and not only that, but model is, I think, the important thing. So what you want to focus on when you're sort of doing your planning and doing your initial mapping of what point you want to make and where you want to take your essay, what I would suggest is finding the thing that makes your team unique, or the thing your team does the absolute best, that other teams, if they wanted to get better at, would look to you as a model. Once you have that sort of like nut of an idea in your head of what makes your team special and what to focus on, you can start doing the people's organizational process when they actually like approach the writing process is different because everybody's mind is a little bit different. Writing is just thinking that you put onto a piece of paper. Oftentimes I find that especially when you're working with a group or a team is working on it, it helps to get sort of the general ideas down and sort of what you want to talk about and where you want to talk about it, and then have one or two people work on what I call the trash draft. The trash draft is just you have a number of either a few people, 2 or 3 at most, who know sort of what point you're trying to get at, what information you have that supports that point, and what you want to do is get all of that onto a piece of paper as much as you can. This is when you're doing any sort of like, it's basically run on thoughts. Try to focus on just getting the points out onto paper. Don't really try to go back and self-edit as you go through. Just try to get it all down, because what we want to do is get a big hunk of text that we can then work with and manipulate and move around. The sculpture is already complete within the model. This is a quote that is apocryphal. It's often attributed to Michelangelo, but there's no real like actual proof that it exists. Why I like it when it comes to writing, especially when in regards to the trash draft, is at least sculptors have like a block of granite that they start with. We have to make our block of granite ourselves, and that's what the trash draft is. It will be a train wreck. It will be full of run-on thoughts. It will be grammatically and often the sentences grammatically incorrect, and often the sentences won't really jive very well. That's fine. Let it be bad. Everybody is bad at writing. Good writing comes from editing. And editing is what we're going to talk about next. Say the thing better. So here's where we actually like take that trash draft, or that first sort of pass you've taken that you think has all the information you want to talk about, all of the answers to the question, all of the sort of evidence that exists that you want to put that supports your answer to the question. This is where we take that block of text and we chip away at the things that aren't necessary. We rearrange and sort of try to work the structure of the essay into a recognizable narrative that we can sort of track the reader through. Oftentimes I've found this is also where we get a really defined answer to the question, which in normal terms you'll refer to as a thesis. I have found oftentimes when I'm writing, I will spend a lot of time working on my trash draft and then my first pass of editing. And by the time I've reached the last paragraph of that first initial draft, that's where I finally put my thesis way down at the bottom. It's just a matter, because while you're going through that writing process, you're actually ideating and rethinking stuff and going through that. What I want to focus on in this section, particularly on the edit, is how we structure a narrative. Narratives is very important when it comes to making a point. It's why you hear newscasters and opinion pieces talk about structuring narratives all the time, because that's how we as humans are very sort of tuned to take in a narrative and then take that information in and go with it from there. So what we want to do is build a narrative structure that leads our reader, judges in this case, to come to the conclusion that our team is a best example for other teams to emulate because of these reasons that we've laid out. How you do that is you take information and then you build it into that sort of structure. One thing I found very helpful in doing this, not only in chairman's writing, but just any sort of narrative, fiction or nonfiction writing, is the concept of therefore and but. It's a very simple concept that actually, once you sort of grok it and sort of understand how it functions, you start to see it turn up everywhere, not only in essays you read from other teams or stories you read in the newspaper, but also your favorite novels, favorite movies. They all have this sort of thing. The principle of which is that in between any sort of point or action you want to do, there should either be therefore or but. Not literally, but there should be some sort of leading into it. This way, it actually like turns your basically mountain of evidence that you've brought to this into a narrative that lets sort of like holds the reader's hand as they go through and introduces them to the thought processes that you want them to have. An example of this, when Exploding Bacon is working on a chairman's essay, these are sort of bits of information that tend to show up. Exploding Bacon doesn't have a centralized school. We're an all over Orlando kind of team. We do tons of demonstrations every year, COVID year excluded, of course. We're a relatively small team in terms of number of students because we don't have any centralized school to draw from or any like big build space until fairly recently. We have had to limit the number of students we've had, and we have these virtual programs or initiatives that we talk. Oftentimes when you're trying to bring this evidence in, especially in a thing like chairman's or any sort of application or submission, especially an award submission, there's a really easy path that sort of lets you take it into just a giant list. Like, Bacon has done this amount of demonstrations and we have these programs that have reached this amount of people. That is informative and useful to have in the planning stages, but in the actual submission, it's boring and it won't actually lead your reader to make the conclusions you want them to make. The whole sort of secret to writing a convincing submission or a convincing argument is that the reader should really realize your point before you tell it to them. And this is building a narrative is sort of how you lead them to that realization without just straight up giving them the information. So this is a list of information. If we add but and therefore to it, we get this. Exploding Bacon is a small team from Orlando, Florida, but Orlando is one of the tech convention capitals of the world, which lets us do all sorts of demonstrations. Therefore, we spent lots of times in these big tech demonstrations focusing on imagery, getting a high polish to everything. But we want to go further than our normal local area. Therefore, we leverage those imagery skills that we've made to build a number of online movements, which multiplied our efforts and made impacting many more people around the world way easier. And we think this focus on using imagery and marketing skills is what makes Exploding Bacon a model for other teams to emulate. So that's sort of how you get a list of bits of information that you want to convey to your judges, and then you turn it into a narrative that sort of reveals itself as it goes through to then get to your thesis. This is something that you can do on the macro and micro level. You can have sort of big ideas of our team is really good at doing X, Y, Z. So we're going to have a paragraph about X, a paragraph about Y, a paragraph about Z. And then in between is here how those all connect and build into these sort of structures that make us a model team. This is also something that you can do bit by bit and go through. It also, again, I cannot stress this enough. You don't have to use but and therefore literally in between each bit. What I've found is it's helpful if you're stuck to put them in and then just delete but and therefore and put other sort of transitional or periods and grammatical stuff. And it will actually read very similarly. It just, the reader fills in the but and therefore kind of automatically. And then we get to the most painful part of writing a chairman's essay, which is saying the better thing that you spent a lot of time structuring to this perfect little clockwork, but you realize that it's 20,000 characters long and you need to cut all of the favorite things you love. This is sort of a rough process for anybody who's new to it. Just know that now. Everybody thinks it's rough. Everybody's with you. It sucks. Every editing process is going to be a bit different just because of the way people write and the way people think and sort of the different things you want to focus on. A couple quick tips I have for that. Abbreviations are always helpful. Just be sure to, when you're doing the styling, spell it out on the first mention and then use the abbreviation afterward. From then, that cuts down a lot of characters. You don't have to keep re-explaining acronyms or initialisms that you've made up throughout your team. Adverbs are killer. A lot of times teams like to say their outreach was very impactful, or they were huge numbers, or they were any sort of roughly this amount, or almost there, or nearly, or fairly. Anything with an ly, basically, you can Control F, search for that. Consider deleting every single one of those. More often than not, it's just there's either a better word for what you're saying. If something is very fast, if something is very fast, speedy. If something is very impactful, it's inspiring. There's often just better words you can put, or you can just go with the original word. You don't have to emphasize very or nearly or all the way. It's unnecessary. Just delete it. And then once you do that sort of thing, you can kind of go sentence by sentence and ask yourself some questions as you go through. Does this sentence answer the question we're trying to answer? Does it say anything that hasn't already been said? If the answer to either of those is no, delete the sentence, or take whichever one that said the thing the best and keep that one, because redundancy is killer when you're trying to hit a very small character count. That is sort of the quick and dirty guide to writing that I have experienced as I've gone through. Keep in mind, when you're doing cutting, you have executive summaries that you can use to make your point. You have a presentation that you can use to make your point. Sometimes there's just so much stuff you really want to hit. You can mention it in the essay and then elaborate on it in either executive summaries or the presentation or the documentation you have. So yeah, that's a quick demonstration, and that is the presentation I have on writing.
Now to go over,
and this is where massive applause would be if we were live, and I would take a big bow, and it would be lovely. But now it's just you and me, Brendan.
Yep. Now I'm just going to grill you the questions and hope that you mess up. So for your trash draft, do you have any recommendations of like visual help, like Post-it notes or any kind of things to help you get that trash draft out there?
Yeah, Bacon was a big proponent of, if you ever see a picture of where the later sort of chairman's essays were written in the last 2 or 3 years, the room at the start of the season had pretty blank walls, and then by the chairman's submission day, it was just covered in Post-its in various ways. This is very helpful in the figure out what you want to say section of the thing, because you can then have a big group of people all throwing out ideas of what they think makes your team the most impactful, or the role model team that would sort of necessitate a chairman's award. And then you can sort of put them all up on a big board. You can all see it, and that's when you can sort of rearrange the ideas around, so you can start get an idea of where you want your narrative to go. And yeah, Post-its are the classic one to do that. A lot of people I know professionally use a lot what are known as mind maps, which is where you have one central idea and then it branches off in different ways. And as you go through the branches, you can see sort of how they connect in other ways. Once you get that, I also suggest when you're like working on your trash draft, have all of that nearby so that you can sort of like make sure you've written down and elaborated on what the point was in your trash draft. And all right, cool, I got that. Moving on to the next Post-it, that sort of stuff.
And in the screen world, would you say maybe like Teams or OneNote or something to use instead of Post-it notes?
Oh yeah, actually there's a bunch of really good collaborative software. Evernote is a really good one. If you want to just do, honestly, Google Docs working in comments and edit mode, I have found to be particularly helpful. The comments my comments can get particularly long if I'm working on a essay, which I apologize to all the people I've worked with notes, because they get a bit unwieldy. But yeah, there's a bunch of collaborative software that you can use to do that in this world of screens. I also find that when you're doing the brainstorming session, you want a lot of people talking to each other all the time. When you're actually doing the writing, and this is going to vary person to person, I can't talk while also working on a draft. I have to kind of like lock everything up. So occasionally it's good to find whoever you want on your team who's going to like take whoever, like 1 or 2 or 3 people who are going to take the first like pass at a draft, give them time to like go do it and then bring it back to the group. And then the whole group can go through it together to figure out like where some changes can be made, stuff like that. And that's where the comments and editing feature on Google Docs is very useful, I found.
And when you're structuring, is there a difference between if you're writing for a video or a technical writing or just a general trying to get your point across?
Yeah, so the video portion of the chairman's award is always a little bit tricky because it's a visual media. Like it's easy to describe the things your team has done because we have words to do that. That's what it's for. Showing that in the video is just completely different language that you have to kind of prepare for. Often what I've found is best is to go through like the season trying to record as much as you can in different situations. And then once you're ready to like prepare your video, you sort of you work on your essay first, figure out what your answer to the question is going to be, what sort of you're going to be touching on in the essay and then the presentation. Have that knowledge and then go take that knowledge that you have to your bank of video that you've taken throughout the seasons and figure out which clips match those points. And that's when you can start structuring so we want a voiceover or something to explain this point. And while we're explaining that point, we have this video clip to go in it. And then you can start building around the clips you have, because when you're building a chairman's video, you have to have a certain amount of archival footage that you can't like go out and reshoot. So you have to kind of figure out how you're going to incorporate that into the broader structure of it. When it comes to like technical writing, stuff like that, so this presentation focused mostly on persuasive sort of writing that has a point that it needs to make, which is, I found a majority of the writing most people do. This is like anything from a job application to an award submission to a email to a particularly annoying neighbor. All of that is sort of you want to make a point to the person you're talking to, and here's the narrative way you can do it. If you're doing anything from like technical writing to any sort of advertising, it's slightly a different sort of thing. It does use narrative, but it's using it in a different way, more to get different meaning across, if that makes any sense.
And saying with the themes versus straight essay, if you have a general theme, then you have a goal. What would your goal be for trying, like if you wanted to complete between the two, between just a general essay and trying to portray your theme across?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because I meant to talk about it in the first section of the presentation and promptly forgot. So when you're making that decision of whether to incorporate sort of like theme into the presentation you're doing. So for example, Exploding Bacon always had some sort of whimsical theme to their essays and presentations. It would from anywhere from like a cooking show to rocket scientists building a thing. That's just who our team is. We're a very whimsical team. We named our team Exploding Bacon. Our logo is a pig on a rocket. We're kind of like the comic sort of ability is written in. We take what we do seriously. We very rarely take ourselves very seriously. And that the theming works for us because that's our team. If that's not your team, that's great. Do whatever your team is comfortable with. If you are much more sort of structured like a Fortune 500 company and that's how you run and everything is very sort of business-like, then definitely make that presentation, make that essay very business-like, make it more like a quarterly report from a 501c3, make it more like a business presentation than you would a skit that you might see from a group of high schoolers. That's totally fine. The important thing is to be true to whatever your team is. Don't try to force your way one way or the other. And oftentimes a lot of teams meet somewhere in the middle on that scale. So I would say when deciding it, take a little while to judge what your team sort of is and what it naturally wants to be, and then go from there.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to watch is all the teams getting ready where they put on their suits and then our students put on fairy wings and cooking hats and everything else. It's different, but it's what gets the point across.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, when you're trying to set up your writing, what do you recommend just to get, other than just putting stuff on paper, how do you recommend just starting everybody and getting people involved? Like just trying to get everybody involved?
Yeah, so when you're trying to set up your sort of chairman's team, I would argue sort of how I would call it, it's tricky because it is a ton of work. So it's hard to, and it's a lot of work and it's a lot of sort of reflection and knowledge of the team. So trying to twist arms in order to like get people interested in doing it is difficult sometimes. Often what I have found is good to find students who are interested in writing, interested in the process, that sort of stuff, or interested in what the team is doing. If you've got a student who loves outreach and loves like seeing the impact of it, that's someone to bring into the chairman's team because they're going to know why why the team is doing what it's doing and can speak to that from a more personal place, which is always good in writing. Any sort of writing you do has to be some sort of reflection of a personal idea or thought. Otherwise, it's going to be cold and not good. When you're trying to sort of organize that group, that's when like I said, when you're trying to do that first ideation, that's when you get the biggest group random possible. So if you have students who are like interested in chairmans and want to help, but are committed to other things on the team or a little busy, right when you're doing that ideation process and figuring out what the team wants to say and what their answer to the question is going to be, that's when you bring as many people in as possible. You want as many ideas. You want to bring those like kids who are half interested, stuff like that. Once it comes to the actual drafting, because writing is a terrible, horrible process that nobody enjoys and likes. This is true, by the way. Every writer that I've talked to feels this way. Nobody likes writing. Everybody likes having written. Writing sucks. But because it's such a arduous process, you kind of want to have the most involved or most passionate students like start to take that first crack at the draft. And then from there, they can get support from the team to do edits and have stuff like that.
So we talked about a lot about chairmans, but how would you recommend writing for a Dean's List submission or a Woody Flowers submission?
So I didn't write many. I have written one Woody Flowers submission myself when I was in high school, and I've helped a couple Woody Flowers submissions. But oftentimes I'm a mentor, so I tend to have not a lot of insight into that. But I would say that a lot of the advice for chairmans does apply to Woody Flowers, except focus more on how that person sort of like, again, the answer, figure out what question you're answering, figure out why the mentor you are highlighting is the best answer to that question, and then dig into more of like, I find Woody Flowers essays that talk about, that let the students talk about how the mentor has helped or worked with them personally to be very effective because it's good. It's a good story. When it comes to Dean's List, it's a little tricky this year because they changed it from one essay into three or four narrative questions, which all have only 1,000 character limits, which is brutal. It's a brutally small amount of space to work stuff in. Try to focus on answering that specific question as sort of precisely and quickly as you can so you can work your way to the end of the answer. It's Dean's List this year is very, very rough. So try to be as restrained in your answer as possible for each question, is what I'd say there.
Okay. And so we're mostly just looking for the impact of the mentors on the students for the Woody Flowers?
Yeah, I don't have the actual text of the award in front of me, but I from memory, I believe it focuses on a mentor who communicates most effectively the benefits of science and technology in the world and stuff like that. So you want to focus on somebody who not only has interactions with students and has really affected students' lives, but also is a very good communicator, which is what Woody Flowers was so good at as a person. He was just a superstar communicator who could make a point in a way that was like, he had such a narrative way of telling you things that were like sciencey and like deep, that hit you in a way that was like truthful very quickly. So what you're looking for in a Woody Flowers nominee is somebody who has that sort of ability to communicate that way, whether it's they teach super well or whether it's they have a way to get kids engaged that is just unique and different. Focusing on that communication of how amazing science and technology is and how they've done that with their students.
And then let's go over deadlines real quick. So what about the Chairman's Award? What is our deadline for that?
Chairman's Award this year is February 25th, 2021. It's coming up now. It's the teams are probably in the cutting phase right now. So best of luck to all of you. I know it's painful.
And then what about the deadlines for Woody Flowers and Dean's List Awards?
Dean's List Woody Flowers is February 18th, 2021. So very nearby, assuming this goes up quickly after we record, which who knows.
And out of your personal experiences, what was your favorite chairman's essay to write? What was the theme for it?
My favorite chairman's essay to write was in 2010. We worked on, and I didn't write it. I helped edit it. But the Chairman's Award in 2010 was the first time we won regional chairmans, and it was a fairy tale of exploding bacon, the tale of Wilbur the pig, and how he spread science technology through the community. Yeah, it was lovely. We had a whole storybook for the video. Everything was very. We had a fairy godmother in the presentation and a princess. It was peak whimsy for bacon. Although the cooking show was a close second. The cooking show was very fun.
Yeah, the cooking show was one of my favorites. And then for the championship stage, I know we get to resubmit. Is there any recommendations on how to resubmit? You mean when you're actually doing the presentation at championships? Yes.
Yeah, it's just a lot of pressure on your presenters. So try to give them all the tools they need. Try to keep them as relaxed as possible, even though it's like a very stressful period right before and after the presentation. And just try to make sure they don't. I think my advice is don't make sure they don't miss championships because they're worried about the chairman's submission. Like it's important, but they'll do fine. And they're like, as long as you give them the materials they need to be prepared and help them run as many times as they need, then they'll get through it and it's good.
So you're saying practice once or twice?
Practice as many times as they feel they want and need.
And do you have anything else to add for the awards? Any tips or tricks?
Yeah, I really want to emphasize that when you're working on the Chairman's Award, make sure that every sort of point you make answers that question. What makes your team a unique model for other teams to emulate? Every team has something they are the best at. Find that thing, focus on it, and make your story emphasize that as you tell through it. And just tell your story. You're the best ones who can.
Now, when you're saying tell your story, how would that work with the engineering process? So how big of a story do you want to tell?
So it depends on what your team's the best at. So like whatever your superpower is, like for instance, Bacon's sort of power in the last couple of years that we submitted chairmans was that despite it being small, we were able to sort of, for lack of a better terms, outsource some of the work of inspiration. So like the first Like a Girl series and that sort of stuff, we helped and got rolling and started. And then once we had other people on board to help and push it forward, that actually made our work a lot more like and multiplied our efforts, which is a great sort of function. So if you want to, if you have something like that, then like focus on how your sort of work has been multiplied. Or if you're smaller and you have a sort of smaller locale, focus on, so for instance, if you're like a small town team who doesn't have a lot of things in the area, focus on what you've done in your small town. Focus on how you've affected your community locally. Focus on the students who have come to the team who are now doing other things that after they've graduated. Like the scale of what culture change is a constant thing, and there are different levels of culture. Focus on whatever culture change you have done the most of, or that you feel that is unique to your team. And that I think will get you where you want to go in terms of like not only where your chairman's submission goes, but also where you scale your impact.
Now, what do you recommend for a rookie team that's submitting for their first time? Should they talk to their sponsors? How should they set up their first application?
Oh yeah, I highly recommend if you're a rookie team going through this process. It says in the Chairman's Award that you're not going to win, which like okay, but focus on your experience as a rookie team. How did you start? Why did your team start? Sort of the fact that your rookie team has started means that a culture change has happened. You went from having no first team to a first team. So like you got the first checkbox done. So focus on how that happened, where it went, sort of what caused it to it. And because you're rookies, you have no sort of prior biases of like what good culture change is. So go with sort of what you know, and that's and let that guide you as you go through it. It's a really sort of eye-opening process, and whether that's talking to sponsors and getting their sort of input as to like why they're sponsoring you, what they thought, what they think of your progress so far. Talk to parents of students on the team about what their like first year as a first parent is like, and sort of how that affected their like. Focus on what your team happening. How your team existing has affected your community around you, because that's where it all starts.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, James, for the Atlanta Regional Workshop Series. Do you have any last thing to add for our viewers?
No, thanks for having me. I've missed Orlando so much, and it's been quite a thing to watch all the first teams adjust to this weird season, and it's given me a lot of hope. So thanks everybody out there. It's been nice.
And thank you again to the Orange County government for letting us put the series together.
First Robotics Competition is the world's landmark robotics competition for students.
In school, you read about stuff, but in First as a whole, you actually go and do it.
In the beginning of January, the challenge comes out every year. Under strict rules and limited time and resources, you have to design, build, program, and test a robot.
There's no blueprint. We get a few rules and guidelines to follow, and then it's up to those students to find something that works.
There's nothing better than just seeing your robot on the field playing for the first time. They're all there like, is it gonna work? Is it gonna work? And then when it works, it's the best feeling ever.
You have mentors that are actually in the field that can tell you, oh, this is why this works, and this is the science behind it. And you're like, oh, wow, that makes so much sense.
They do a great job, not just about STEM, but about life, how to go through college, how to go through, a tough, physics class.
At face value, First Robotics Competition is a robot competition, but at the end of the day, it's so much more than that.
People ask me like, oh, you build robots? I says, no, we're really running a business and all the things that go along with that.
We deal with a lot of marketing, social media.
I've learned business sides of things,
problem solving, working in groups.
I'm learning how to communicate with people, how to reach out to local businesses.
So we kind of have robotics as the starting point, but we branch out to different areas and expand.
So the ultimate goal every year is always to get to the first championship.
The first championship is basically like the Olympic for robots.
There's hundreds of teams from all over the world there, and you get to see some of the best teams that exist.
It's very competitive, but you're friends with the people that you're going against. It's like a sport, but in its own way, it's better than a sport.
Being part of First, it's really changed my life and how I think about myself, how I think about others.
Participating in First actually taught me that I'm capable of doing anything that I set my mind to.
First has really inspired me to give back in my old elementary school. I'm trying to help their robotics program that just started this year. I want those kids to have the opportunity to learn about STEM.
As a participant in the First program in high school, you get access to $80 million worth of scholarships.
There are scholarships for colleges, universities, as well as technical programs.
It also looks really good on the actual application to be on First.
First does a really great job trying to open programs to make sure that you could actually accomplish anything in STEM, no matter where you're from, your background, your language, or anything like that.
I really do consider myself part of the STEM community, and I couldn't be more prouder to say that.
First Robotics Competition is one of 4 Engaging First programs that shows students unique challenges and helps them learn new engineering skills and real-world skills that'll help them in the future.
First is the future.
First is accomplishment.
First is passion.
First is inspiring.
First is changing my story.